Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 203. I'm one of, hopefully, many of your co-hosts today, Lauren Gray, coming to you from Southwest Florida, where it's nice and hot and humid. But I will take that as over bad storms and all the other things that seem to be that the weather is affecting us these days. For those who are joining us on simulcast on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope TV, and now officially LinkedIn. We are broadcasting on LinkedIn, and also we are simulcasting out to our friends and compatriots at HSMAI Asia Pacific region and HSMAI European region. So greetings to all those that are catching us at odd hours. Now, your replays, of course, of this show will be on Monday and Tuesday of next week at more appropriate times. They are replays of this show. But we do keep live monitoring. So as people join the conversation, what have you, we do go over and give responses and replies. Hosts do get back with you if there's questions, comments, or insights. And then as such, we will keep the information to you at a more regular time as well. So with us, as always, Robert McCole from Rock Cheetah puts together quite a nice list that he distributes in support of HSMAI North America that he sends to the marketing board for them, in which he creates a good topic list. Now, it's shared only with them at this particular point, and of course, as show notes for us when we after finish broadcasting, we send the link out, obviously, to the hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. You look at show number 203, and in there you'll see all of the topics and links that he has put together as a list. He will also begin to curate that list and begin to distribute it through Rock Cheetah himself. To those who are interested to subscribe to it. It's a great, comprehensive, well-curated list that he puts together each week of things that are going on within the hospitality industry, specifically this week. Without it just be a rebroadcast of news, it's actually a wonderful list, as it were, of things to be attentive to and mindful of. So because of that, it is a good show to, or list to go and look at. His top topic that he put together this week was Expedia CEO Mark I never can say Mark's last name correctly. Okerstrom. Made the comment, war over, the best booking experience is almost over. The war over the best booking experience is almost over. Interesting conversation we'll get to about as to why he says that. Categorically, Robert puts together between brand and product, intermediaries and distribution, marketing and strategy, tax and finance, and then, of course, the infamous RUT-RO, which is interesting today. But under brand and product, Robert put together Caesars being sold to Eldorado Resorts for $17.3 billion. Why does it affect us? Ambang hires Bank of America for luxury hotel sales. And Hard Rock Hotel turns development up to 11, a head nod towards an infamously cult favorite Spinal Tap movie way back, where the reason why they were so good is because all of their instruments could be turned up to 11, where everybody else could be turned up to 10. Of course, that was the funny part of it. Then under intermediaries and distribution, he has Expedia Group ruling outcharging commissions on hotel resorts fees, which is kind of interesting because Hotels.com versus Expedia has gone different directions as to what they're going to be doing. Sabre Hotel Solution integrates content with OTAs. Airbnb rebrands Top Tier to Airbnb Luxe, adds dedicated concierge services. And then under marketing and strategy, he has hotel brands in the urban centers. Travel needs to consider life without Facebook and Google, says former Facebook investor. And Airbnb, Expedia, Google, 4 lessons the hotel industry can learn from the digital giants. Then under tech and finance, we have the category of IT execs in dealing with the complicated tech landscape. Cognitive revolution, pace of change will determine hotels' tech future. And the trouble starts if Facebook's new currency succeeds. It's actually an interesting discussion. And then the RUT-RO is the hotel hackers are hiding in the remote control curtains. And that's actually a fun topic to have for that. Since I have the dubious pleasure of being, with hair sticking on the other end, the only host currently at the moment, then I will be the first to go and crack into the headline, which is Expedia's statement that the war is over. The war over the best booking experience is almost over. Now, in the context of this, Mark went over and said that the optimization capabilities of booking are about as good as they're going to be as an industry. The methodology of clicking and putting in dates and looking for things is about what it is. That the real contest now begins literally on the guest experience, which is scary for us to consider that an OTA is telling us as hospitality people that the concern is guest experience. But as we know from comparing our booking process for branded, unbranded, and what have you. Oh, Mr. Robert, you got a haircut.
I did. Well, truth be told, I attended High Tech before getting my early summer shearing, and our friend Holly Zoba commented that I needed a haircut. So I've now I've gone super short. That's much shorter. And hopefully to atone for my my upsetting of Holly. Obviously.
And I might not notice that your headset is now been replaced with Samsung Buds.
Yes. Now, can you hear me at all?
Yeah, a little bit more of a room sound, not so direct to your mouth, but not a problem. It sounds fine.
I've had a staffing problem here. My assistant Seth the cat has attempted an unsuccessful coup by biting the cable of my headset. I believe Seth is angling to try to take over my role in the show.
I think so.
And so he's subverting the audio quality of my previous
well, he certainly has
dynamic great headset.
Well, so, he has dominated the show by going behind you when you don't know it, making faces.
Oh yes, Seth is always going behind my back.
Hey, so
it's all fitting together. Yes.
So as we get started with, I went through literally all of the topics that you were generously put together this week. And
wow, first person ever as a host on the show to look at the list before the show.
No, not only look at the list, read the entire list. I went through every article this week.
Oh dear.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
And I was actually diving into your main topic, your top headline, with our boy Mark out of Expedia talking about how the
best booking experience is almost over.
Yes. Yeah. And I thought it was very nerve-wracking that somebody in the OTA business, and as he says, the ABAC and agency is their concern, is telling us as hospitality people that we need to be guest-centric, that the booking process really isn't the strong point of the development process anymore. I don't agree with him on lots of fronts. One is that he says he doesn't want to do test and learn anymore. He just wants to learn. It's like, well, no, you can't just decide what you
test. Don't test. Just learn. I don't know how you do that. As well, if you're doing things that have been done before and proven out,
Mr.
you can just read up on other people's stuff. But.
Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Butler.
Hello.
We're just about ready to solve world peace right now. Just as you stepped in, we're ready to solve it. Yeah. Now we lost track of what the hell we're talking about.
You disagree with the article about not testing and that all bookings were going to be as frictionless as each other moving forward?
Yes. Yeah.
What a bunch of hogwash. That's all I can say.
Hey, this is a family broadcast. Mr. Butler, I know in the country that you come from, you may be able to speak like that on the public.
What is it, South Africa?
I thought, wait, is it
my apologies for my profanity, but it was absolutely
I thought he was from the British Virgin Islands.
Swallow.
Wait,
Hog swallow.
Oh. There we go.
No, he did make a really. I did like one statement that he made in there, and that was very early into the article where he says, "Your data knows more about your business than you do."
For sure,
I have to actually
Mr. Tim Peter has been saying forever, right? How data is the crown jewels. It's probably the most important part, of the business, along with customer service. But no, I just fundamentally disagree. To say that all booking experiences are going to be the same or equal or on par is just very naive. I think you just look at the cross section in the hotel industry now. Yes, there are similarities, but no one's really maximized that in terms of personalization, in terms of leveraging psychology and nurturing and nudging through the funnel. There's a lot of opportunity with AI that's really going to make a big difference in terms of booking. And I think different people have different approaches. Ed on this show a couple of weeks ago was talking about some of the things we're testing in the Myrtle Beach market related to changing the way we think about bookings and not pushing people through that funnel, but actually getting to understand what they're really looking for versus just dates and a room type, but why are they traveling and what are they interested in? So I think we're going to be evolving and improving the booking experience for at least the next 10, 20 years, and everyone's going to be taking a little different approach to it. So to say everyone's equal on that front is idiotic.
Well, he implied that actually they won. Is what I got out of the article. That he's implying that they won, and now they're on to bigger and better things. That everybody else is behind them. Nobody's going to beat them.
And that's a huge,
first I would say
plus for Booking
faults,
and everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Booking.com's booking experience is infinitely better than Expedia's. Like they use a lot better psychology. Like the layout of answering questions is far superior to Expedia. So I just think that's very I don't know. He's not really looking at it objectively. He's looking at it very subjectively. But I agree to a point in that the industry as a whole, individual hotels, even the big chains, are not doing a good job. But a lot of that is because of antiquated technology. We've seen, how many people are using iHotelia or Synexus as their booking engine, and neither of them do a great job on mobile. And we know that consumers have migrated to mobile in droves. More than 60% of almost every hotel's traffic now is mobile, and yet they're lagging behind on mobile bookings. That's why people like Fuel can exist. Our booking engine crushes both iHotelia and Synexus when it comes to mobile bookings, because we borrowed a lot of the same tricks that Booking.com and Expedia have done, and it's been really, really effective. So there's some truth in what he's saying, but it's very myopic. It's very, like I said, very subjective, and I think he's not really looking at it the appropriate way for the industry.
Yep.
I think it's either arrogance or complacency or a combination, which is
or puffery.
Very dangerous.
Be a little puffery, right? Where he's just kind of thumping his chest, but I don't know.
Yeah, and that's very dangerous for Expedia. They went down that road, not quite 10 years ago. Yeah, early 2000s, especially when Priceline had acquired Booking.com, and they were out there trying to march into Europe, very full of themselves, going, "Oh, we're just going to go force the U.S. merchant model down the throats of all these hoteliers," and they got beaten badly. I mean, they were rebuffed by not only by the hoteliers, and all the volume and all the participation went to Booking. Right? I mean, it was bad. So I don't know. I was
on top of that. He also poo-pooed on TripAdvisor. Like he was calling them out a little bit. It's like, yeah, it's really hard to do something completely different than what you started as, and now that you're taking bookings and trying to be free for what you now have to pay for, and it really was kind of like, wow, okay, so draw a line in the sand, start slinging some poo.
Yeah, well, and they used to own TripAdvisor too. So
right, yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the objective of the article was, or really, or his statements were, and I'm trying to understand. Was this a strategic play somehow? Because I'm missing that if it was, and if not, then he needs a little bit more PR coaching for sure.
Here's I think
it ruffled everyone's feathers in the industry.
Yeah, this is possibly, and maybe I'm overstating it. I don't know if it's the challenge of the comparison. Everyone's like, oh, well, replacing Dara is going to be tough and things like that, because what was Dara's deal? Dara was the deal guy for Barry Diller, right? That was how Dara kind of got that Expedia role. And what were they doing? Yes, they acquired Orbitz, they acquired Travelocity, they acquired all this stuff under Dara to basically build up this monster. And Dara was also very good at focusing on, we are going to spend a lot of money. Hey, Wall Street, hold on. We've got to shore up our core systems, right? Åkerström he's the CFO, right? So he's not the operations guy. He's not the marketing guy, not necessarily the deal guy. And my worry is Expedia I don't know, worry for Expedia in terms of market cap and valuation. And profits. I don't know. He may be sitting there going back, we've solved it. And that's not Expedia's culture at all. Expedia's culture, when I spoke to their CIO about big data and personalization, things like that, his point was screaming, anyone who says that they figured it out is lying. We're trying to discover the proper questions to ask. I mean, they were pre-step A, right? I mean, and that's always where they've been. It was always that test and prove. So I don't know.
Mr.
Interesting pivot.
Hello. I know I walked in late, and I hate to walk in and jump right into the fray because maybe I'm going to repeat something somebody already said. But clearly, we're talking about the Mark Okerstrom article, and
Yes.
We've solved for booking and all this other kind of stuff. I read that a slightly different way, and I think everything you just said that I heard, Robert, and I came in partway through what you were saying, so I don't know that I heard all of it, but it all made sense to me.
You missed the really smart stuff at the beginning.
Well, it must have been very good because the stuff I heard was quite smart.
It was really bad. Yeah, I must have balanced out, maybe, hopefully.
So the one thing that I took away from that article that I didn't hear you say, and you may have said this before I came on, was that I think he's talking to an audience of investors, and one of the things they're starting to say is we've achieved all the growth that we're going to find in the way we've achieved growth in the last bunch of years, right? Conversion rate is not going to triple, right? We're not going to add 10,000 new properties because there aren't 10,000 new properties to add. What I read into that was, for our growth to continue as a company in the way that investors have become accustomed to that growth, we need to get deeper in the value chain. We need to find other ways to monetize our relationship with customers. And that's going to include getting, deeper into what happens after the booking. That gets deeper into what happens, on property. It happens deeper into what happens in destination, right? How do we monetize other parts of the trip as effectively as we've monetized the booking? And so I actually think that's a scarier point of view from a scarier perspective from a hotelier's point of view of, if you rely today on a lot of F&B, you're already feeling some pressures in some cases from places like DoorDash, right? Well, now let's say that Expedia just buys DoorDash, or Expedia starts making its own version of that, or, they solve for the ticket situation, which is still way too fragmented in terms of, what you do in terms of events and stuff once you're on property. So I think that's how I read the article. Now, that doesn't mean that I read it the right way and that what you read was a different thing, was the incorrect way. It just, I read a slightly different way, and I read it as he's telling investors, the growth that we've achieved to this point through this means is slowing down. And so to get the same kind of growth, we're going to be moving in some additional directions and still drive the growth, but do it in a different way. That's how I read it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, we were talking before you came on about what was his objective with this, because clearly I think if you look at it through that lens, yes, it was probably a smart message to them, to set expectations with Wall Street.
Yeah.
But, the byproduct of the conversation is that his main revenue streams, the hotel industry at large, reads it a completely different way. And like you mentioned, it's a fearful way, most likely. And it's probably going to backfire. I feel like this is very obvious. This guy is not someone that's accustomed to PR and communication. It's because there's certain things he said in there that are going to, make people step away, especially when in the same time he's saying things like, our relationship with hotels has never been better. Well, I mean, I don't think me talking to hotels, I wouldn't say that's entirely accurate, but yeah, it is a low bar,
I actually agree with Robert on that one. I completely agree that for Expedia's relationship with hotels to never be better is sort of like, me saying, my relationship with cancer has never been better, like
for sure. No question.
Yeah, he had some very weird, I just thought that some of these were really strange quotes, right? Where he said, Google SEO created TripAdvisor. No. TripAdvisor started as a guidebook and then figured out where they kind of needed to pivot their business and then capitalized on SEO. And then Google SEM created booking. It's like, no, they saw a tool sitting over there and went, just like Lauren does in AppSumo, goes, I'm going to try using that. That looks interesting, sort of thing, and it worked really well for them. So I don't know. And how did they use those things? They tested and learned how to use it better to optimize it.
Well,
right?
he wasn't going to say the truth. I mean, what really created Booking.com, let's be really
was
clear
Expedia.
Was Expedia's margins. That's exactly what created
absolutely. Yeah, and their arrogance of trying to hit those margins into Europe when they did not have commensurate demand to earn those margins.
That's exactly right.
That was the killer. But here's the really weird one. If you book with any Expedia property, you're going to be in great hands. It makes it irrational for anyone to book with anyone else. That's the next vector of competition. Well, Expedia, what are they going to do? Buy and operate hotels? That model hasn't worked out.
No, I think it's
for the hotel groups.
I think it's getting deeper into the value chain. Again, he emphasized the point about where was it? Something about I got to see if I can find the term. Putting more focus on the agent side, right? And being an agent on here it is. We've had this mantra of putting the A back in OTA and putting the agent back in travel agent.
Right.
He then follows it up with a brilliant, I don't think it's necessarily going to be agents on the phone, right?
Yeah.
But what will differentiate us is to be truly able to help people be able to advocate in situations, And I think he's saying we want to be the first choice of the guest. We want to be the place the guest goes when they have any situation during their travel experience. Oh, by the way, we're going to help facilitate that. Oh, by the way, we're going to charge some fees for that, right? So I really read it as a growth discussion, and really about we've got to get deeper in the value chain to make that more effective.
Yeah. Well, there was another article that I didn't post that I probably should have put underneath it. They did, I think it was at the Skift conference, one of the Expedia product people said that they are going to now be contacting, or basically working with with guests with delayed flights and things like that, and actually allow the guests to contact the hotel and to have some sort of interaction like that. But they didn't exactly explain how. I'm sure that's probably through some sort of protected email that the hotel can see, oh, it's that guest, but not using the guest's email or direct text messaging to their phone or whatever, right? Where they can retain control over the guest. But I can see them certainly getting deeper into it. Their investments in Alice for the in-room technology and things like that. All of that makes a lot of sense. So I don't think they're going to go out there and start buying things.
It makes a lot of sense.
They're going to try to get into the
It makes a lot of sense for Expedia, not necessarily for the hotel industry.
Correct.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to go way back. I'm going to literally enter the Wayback Machine to a post I wrote in 2014 in response to an interview that was given by Expedia's SVP of Worldwide Engineering, Aman Bhutani, and John Kim, who was then the company's chief product officer. I don't think he's still there, but
he is actually the president of. At least I think he's still president of HomeAway.
There it is. Right. So, but they gave an interview. They were talking at a conference, and they said, let's see, technology is finally ready to take large data sets and aggregate them in sub-seconds. Every click connects you to large data sets. It remembers everything you're doing and plays it back to you, gets a sense of your history, blah, 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 blah. They say in the U.S. it takes people 48 searches before they book. We thought it would take weeks before people buy, but what we found is people use it intensely and then book within a day. So they spend snatches of time, but get one experience across devices. This allows them to make faster decisions. And they go on from there to say, let's see. They had a couple of comments that now I'm trying to find. Basically, their whole point was they're trying to use all this data to understand what the guest is doing and serve the guest needs more effectively. Now, this was 5 years ago, right? Yeah. So what's interesting is in that interview, where is it? Bhutani said something that I love this. I've always tried to come up with the right analogy for this because I think this is a fundamental principle of digital. Bhutani said, we talked mobile for 20 years and it happened gradually, and then suddenly. This happens with all technology usually. You know it's coming, and then boom, the generation that can design it builds it and expects it. You know, I always talk about, technologies like bamboo, right? It sleeps, it creeps, and then it leaps. Or, or like the old analogy of people setting up the dominoes, and it takes them a long time to set up the pattern. But then once you knock them over, all of a sudden it happens really quickly that they all fall down. And, they were talking about this 5 years ago. They may now just be reaching the point where all the pieces are in place to make this happen in a real way. So I will admit, I'm looking at this through a lens of having, I won't say seen this as a trend 5 years ago, but more expected it. It's something that I kind of expected people would do. So I admit I'm looking through, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. This one's my hammer of, I've been expecting to do this for a while. I wrote another piece the same year, a couple weeks later, literally almost 5 years to the day. OTAs want to own your guest every step of the way. Warning, OTAs want to own your guest every step of the way. So I just think this is the likely outcome of stuff they've been working on for a long time, and really about how they're going to try to monetize their business as they go forward.
Yeah, they want to be end-to-end, right?
They want to have
a greater share of wallet and own the customer, right? Because that's what the good agents do. You just go, hey, travel agent, take care of it, right?
Exactly right.
Book a great vacation for me and take care of me if things go wrong, and let's go, right? You don't have to worry about anything. And I think that is a good goal. I just took exception with some of his comments with, talking about tours and activities. He goes, we started 20 years ago with having a one-stop shop, all this bluster about tours and activities, whatever. We've had that for 20 years. And that's total bullshit.
Right.
I mean,
right.
20 years ago, yes, they had a
Stuart,
deal.
didn't he poo-poo you on your
I wasn't allowed to say codswallop, and you're allowed to say bullshit? What is up with that?
No, you said hogwash.
I did say hogwash to start with. I think I used both.
Which actually,
we don't talk about pigs. We don't talk about pigs.
Robert, probably in your brilliance of putting the content together, that relates to two other articles that you put together: Sabre and what they're doing with the OTA integration, and also with Airbnb, which is Stuart's favorite topic, and their Lux product now. It's a concierge level.
I threw that in. Basically, Stuart. I try for Stuart to get an Airbnb article, and now even if there isn't a good one, just to make sure it's there. And the same with Ed. If I can get a good blockchain thing in there for Ed, that's always the goal.
Stuart can't get him enough Airbnb topics. He loves the stuff. Loves it. Just breakfast in the morning.
And again, to clarify, my issue isn't with Airbnb. My issue is with the industry, like glorifying Airbnb as the second coming and doing its job by promoting it every second of every day and creating the monster that it's fearful of. It's ridiculous.
Right.
Preach, brother. Preach.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
It is.
And Airbnb is taking everything the industry is given us.
I didn't know that they had bought the Lux property, the Lux stuff. I didn't know that they had done that. And this combination is actually kind of interesting in the sense that they're offering concierge engagement for the premium 2000 property. It's a nice step. I mean, it kind of. The thing I think that I got out of all this is that I remember just not even so many years ago that travel agents, internet's going to kill travel agents. There's no longer be travel agents. It's a dying. And for a while, it did
kill a lot of them.
It killed a lot of them.
A lot. The ones that didn't add value,
right.
Pretty much
it wiped them out.
Right.
But now what's happening is because of all this stuff, the booking engine complexities, the variations, the paralysis of decision because of too many choices and so forth, and having a knowledgeable destination-based agent that can navigate and be responsible for a guest's experience is a valued commodity again. It's a respected position again.
Well, it is, but it's not to the degree the media would have you believe, right? Because there's a lot of sensationalism about how travel agents are on the rise and they're back to the heyday. But it's nothing like it used to be, where every booking went through a travel agent. It's
true.
It's gone up a few percent from where it was. And let's be clear, it was at rock bottom. So it's kind of like we were talking about earlier with Expedia and the relationship with the hotels. The bar is very low. So for more people to be using travel agents, I mean, it's not that bigger jump though, and in terms of overall planning of vacations, it's still a very small minority of bookings are made through travel agents.
And as the old expression says, even a dead cat will bounce if dropped from high enough.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
and a huge portion of those leisure travel agency bookings are going through wholesale channels, right?
Yeah,
They're
sure.
getting booked on
Yeah.
vacation sites. They're going to Apple. They're going to American
Right.
Airlines Vacations or
But
Southwest.
like you said, the article that Saber's including that information, the OTA information, in with their GDS information and so forth, so that agencies have a more seamless ability to selectively choose rates and opportunities compared to jumping between platforms and so forth.
Well, I mean, think of it this way: where does your business come from if you're these guys today?
Yeah.
Where does your business come from?
If you're a travel agent.
Yeah.
If you're a travel agent, if you're an OTA, if you're Airbnb, where does your business come from initially? Where do you find your customers the first time? Online. Which means
they're using the same platform they're trying to get around. I mean,
they're trying to get around Google.
Relying on Google,
trying to get around
Google for search. Yeah.
You're relying on Google or Facebook primarily, right?
Yeah.
And what people are starting to recognize is that that's becoming a more expensive channel. It's getting harder to do. And so, I said this at Rock this past week. It's one thing if you pay for the customer through an expensive channel the first time you connect with them. If you pay for them the second and third and fourth times, you're doing something wrong. And what everybody's starting to wake up to, and rightfully so, because the world has changed to some degree.
Better than you. Yeah, or that channel's doing something.
Well, sure,
providing value to the customer.
But right, but
people they book their air, and then they
is,
want you want a hotel with that, and it's easier, maybe, right? So.
No, right, Robert. But my point is, if you are the OTA, you are paying Google for that traffic.
Okay.
And to a lesser degree, you're paying Facebook for that traffic. If you're Airbnb, you're paying Google for that traffic, and to a lesser degree, you're paying Facebook for that traffic. The point being that what they're starting to realize is that as those costs go up, that's not sustainable. So rather than pay for that traffic every single time they come, pay for it for the first time. Acquire them however you need to acquire them, but make sure the second time, precisely to your point, you've given them enough of a value proposition that when people say, "Oh, I have a travel need," they don't go to Google and do a search. They go back to the place they were the last time they did it. They go back to Expedia. They go back to Airbnb. They go back to a travel agent because they've gotten the value that they expected. And they know that's where I go. Any of you have a mechanic you take your car to all the time?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, do you shop around for a different mechanic every time?
No, not every time, no.
Why?
Because
after the first 5 screwed up the car. Yeah.
Right. You trust them. You like them. You've used them before. You know them, etc. And that's my person. That's my mechanic. Right. That's my shop where I always take my car. This is everybody saying we want to be that shop. We want to be that place where people go every time. That's my take on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, and I was taking it more from the hotel's perspective if it's coming through an OTA channel or something like that. Yeah,
but even a hotel.
And again,
but even a hotel. I mean, if you pay an OTA to achieve a guest, to acquire a guest the first time they come, there's really no crime in that. Nope. There really isn't, because the OTA
incremental guest okay every time. Right.
The incremental guest who you weren't going to reach on your own could be a really good thing. If that same guest books through you every time they come to you, if they come to you more than once and every time they come to you, they book through the OTA, you've done something wrong.
Yeah, you've done many things wrong.
Yeah, right.
Or
you've done some things
OTA,
wrong. Right.
Well, I would take it though. It depends on the hotel and the relationship. If it's a very sparse, low engagement sort of thing, and the person books lots of travel all over the U.S. and your hotel's getting left out, okay, maybe not. But if they're always booking whatever, a Wyndham or a Hilton, and they're using another channel, then you've got a big. And
that's my point. That's my point. I'm talking about the quote unquote loyal guest who is loyal to your property but not loyal to your booking channel, or rather loyal to a booking channel that is an indirect one. That's a problem. Right?
Yeah.
That absolutely exists.
there was a group of brand agnostic. I think it's a fairly large group, though, and perhaps growing, of brand agnostic individuals who may wind up booking the same properties. They don't really care, but they wind up being repeat guests of these just because of its location or whatever. But they're looking for deals, whatever, and they, whatever, don't have enough. There isn't enough value creation for them to go look over at that property. Now, maybe you can get them to
Robert,
search.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing that segment exists. I'm saying if that segment was your only problem with people booking through third parties every time, you wouldn't have much of a problem. I don't really think that. I don't really think that's the situation.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
I think you wind up. I think you wind up with the brand loyal people, and you get them right, which is good. You've got the brand agnostic people who are going to be very difficult to get because maybe they like doing that. That's in their nature, right? They don't.
And if they're the folks,
but how do you shift the camps is a really interesting question, right? How does an OTA break somebody away from Marriott? That's tough, I think, right? If they are really loving Marriott, and how do you break somebody, if you're Marriott, away from an OTA if they really love that? That's, I don't know. I think it's the parts in the middle, right? In the Venn diagram, you got to figure out who's in play. Yeah,
well, and to that point, I mean, the folks who are truly brand agnostic and only care about price, as a general rule, you don't want them to be your guests, except for those times when you desperately need them. Realistically, right? I mean, you want them, for distressed inventory. If they're truly brand agnostic and only care about price,
okay, but I don't think you make.
I don't know.
I don't think you make the assumption it's only about price. I say it's about value, right? They're brand agnostic and they just care. They don't care. They'll stay in a 4-star hotel.
Sure.
They'll pay. They'll pay $400
a night. Value
but,
and they're not booking direct, then you're doing something wrong.
For sure.
Probably.
And I think I think we're running into a dangerous spot where we're thinking the consumers are one-dimensional, and we know that they're not, right? They're more complex and more discerning than that. So we primarily work with independent hotels, and there are properties we work with that, to a lot of their guests, they're not brand loyal in the sense of it's always Marriott, but they're super loyal to the independent property because they had a great experience. And we have clients on one side that just milk the OTAs as much as they can and get as much business and don't really spend the time to look at who's coming and whether or not they've been multiple times or any of that stuff. And these guys tend to be like 30 to 60% reliant on OTAs. And then we've got another group of clients that are very strategic about it. And they take the Tim Peter approach and say, okay, the first time guests from Expedia or booking is great, but we need to do everything we can to turn them into a repeat guest. So first, we're going to make sure they have a great experience. Mm-hmm. And at some point, at the appropriate time during that great experience, we're going to make sure we get their contact information and let them know why we're collecting it. And then after the fact, we're going to make sure during the stay and after the stay, we're going to continue to educate them on what the value proposition is to them, not to the hotel, but to the guest for booking direct next time. We may offer incentives, but we're sure as heck going to let them know what that is. And then next year, we're going to be proactive, because if we see that person came, they booked in May, they stayed in June, prior to May the next year, we're going to start picking up the phone and calling them. We're going to start sending them emails. We're going to communicate and nurture that relationship between those points. And you better believe these people are like sub 10% reliant on OTAs because they actively work on it.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's effective. And it's really effective if you put the effort in.
But that actually lends to an article also.
And that's the effort you have to put in.
Yeah.
Robert, you put in a nice article about the guy that was a previous Facebook investor, Mr. Namey or whatever. And he put in about the fact we got to learn how to get off of Google and Facebook because they're not out for us.
Somebody needs to invent the methadone to the.
No kidding. This guy does come across a little bit like a spurned lover or something on Facebook.
It does, doesn't he? Well, he embarked on a 3-year tour. It sounds like Gilligan's Island.
And he used to be Zuckerberg's mentor, right? He was very heavily involved in early days Facebook. And at some point, that relationship went south.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, that's a bit of a bitter pill you're throwing out there. But again, and it's something that we have also talked about at different times and points, is that they are on the top of the funnel, they are at the top of the food chain, and if everything you run through them, it's their sandbox. They change rules and guidelines and capabilities and functionalities at will to their benefit, and you have to exercise what it is around them. And the only true asset is the direct relationship you have with your guests that you can exercise communication with. That's the core of it. But so he isn't wrong, I don't think. It's just his presentation of it was a little bit like
he's emotionally invested in this for sure.
Well, and he may be right. He may be right.
Yeah, 100%. 100% he's right.
I don't know whether he will be right or not, and I have one specific reason why I think he might be wrong. And I don't know this for sure because. His point is, and we're seeing it to some degree with things like GDPR and the like, his point is regulation is coming, and a lot of the things that have made Google so effective, a lot of things that has made Facebook so effective may be disallowed in a different regulatory environment, right? And that may well be true. Of course, I suspect Google and Facebook, the reason he may be wrong is I suspect Google and Facebook are in a better position to control what the regulatory environment ends up looking like than most other people. So I will bank on the regulations hurting Google and Facebook and not hurting, individual hotels or individual marketers or the like when the regulations actually exist and actually hurt Google and Facebook and don't hurt the other players.
And even when they do, they'll be like a mere flesh wound, right? I mean,
I suspect
in Europe,
we're going to give you a half a day of cash flow penalty. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Exactly.
Ooh. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Yeah. But I mean, his attitude in that article is kind of funny. He's like, he's talking about the Toronto experiment. And he's like, good luck with that. How are you going to like that after? It's like, dude, you're just throwing down cards. Like, Well,
he's not wrong that some of the actions, I'm gonna turn into Ed for a second here.
Tinfoil hat time. Ready?
Well, no. I don't wear a tinfoil hat. I also trust Facebook, not even a little.
No,
not because I think they're more trustworthy or less trustworthy. Not because I think their incentives are more or less are any different than the incentives any of the other companies have, but because they have consistently peed all over, any rational, reasonable expectation of what you can do. The others have tended to be better behaved, or at least have done a better job not making it public how ill-behaved they may have been. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I do tend to say that most companies have an economic incentive to not do anything too egregiously wrong with our data. But that doesn't mean they won't screw up if those incentives change. It doesn't mean that they won't screw up if like Facebook, they're just, they don't seem constitutionally wired to think about, protecting the customer from their own clutches.
Well, and to be
Their motto, starting off, was move fast and break things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I mean, they were consistent with their mission.
And we need to be honest about it, though. It's been really successful for them.
Of course.
I mean, have they been angelic in the process? Absolutely not. Have people lost trust? Absolutely. But us people still using the platform on a daily basis?
Absolutely.
And addicted to it? Absolutely. So why would they change? There's no incentive for them to change that approach at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ted Tang, who was my boss at Leading Hotels, and Robert, I think you went to school with, right? You were just a little bit ahead of him in school.
I did.
Yeah,
Ted was my accounting TA my freshman year.
Well, there you go. All right, so fantastic. So Ted always talks about this idea of it's a great way to phrase exactly what you just said, Stuart. Rather, excuse me. I don't know why I called you Sean all of a sudden.
I think go worse.
Because you're being Ed. You have to stop being Ed, Tim.
Yeah, exactly. But no, Ted always talks about this idea of what he calls success patterns. You build up over the course of your career, or a company builds up over the course of its lifetime, success patterns. They're the things for which you get rewarded. And because you're consistently rewarded for them, you keep doing them. Even when the circumstances might change where those success patterns no longer apply, or might not actually serve you in a positive way. And Stuart, you're exactly right. Their success pattern has been do whatever we want with customer data. They don't care, and they keep coming back for more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's why I don't trust them. It has nothing to do with, I think they're less reputable or I don't know the right word. It's not that their incentives are any better or worse than Google's or any better or worse than Amazon's or any better or worse than Apple's. It's that their success has entirely been built on pissing all over that.
Right.
Well, and those incentives have not had incentives for being mindful fiduciaries.
Correct. Right.
At all.
For sure.
It's the opposite of it.
And perception reflects that too, right? I was listening to this amazing podcast this week. I forget the guy that does it, but the podcast called Thinks Out Loud with Tim Peter. I don't know if you guys have heard it. But I mean, the guy sounds like he kind of knows what he's talking about. He was talking about the Mary Meeker report. In one of the stats in there was, I think it was about, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was about, would you trust these people with your records, right? That's what it was. And they're all around 50-ish%. They're all kind of Google, Amazon, all these people. But at the bottom of the pack, several points below was Facebook. So it's clearly a perception that Facebook should not be trusted as much as these other entities. And yet, we're still blindly using it because every time people are going to forget about the risks if it's convenient and benefits them in some way. And clearly Facebook does.
And
I'm feeling very proud about this. I'm going to tie this to another article that Robert put in, and that is.
Hang on, before we move on.
Oh, we're not moving on. It's the same topic. It's the same topic.
Oh, no, I know. I just want to. I would love to see some research of the people who don't trust Facebook and dislike it, who love Instagram and everything.
Everything
about it. And
Facebook
WhatsApp,
Messenger and WhatsApp.
Because because you got Facebook Messenger. I think probably has some stronger halo effect from Papa Facebook, but I don't know, because people love Instagram. It's easy to use. It's great. It does all these cool things. User interface is fantastic. And the same with WhatsApp, right? They're great products. So I think that's still coming down to, it's like Google search. Yeah. Get an Android phone, turn all the signals on, give Google everything. And is your life going to be maybe more convenient, easier? Maybe. Same thing with Amazon, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see if people just kind of go, there's no privacy, I don't care, but I'm getting better deals or better stuff or things easier. I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting time, and we'll see.
So I want to first of all, thank you for the nice plug, Stuart. I appreciate that.
Of course.
I'll try to make sure to call you by the right name going forward if you're going to do that.
That podcast was by Tom Peter.
There you go. Exactly.
No, really just incite him to pull in and go say Tim Peters. Tim loves me.
Yeah, exactly.
Tom Peters. Yeah.
Exactly. But just to give that actual stat, in full credit, these both come from the Internet Trends report from what is now Bond Internet, which is Mary Meeker's new VC. She was at Kleiner Perkins for years and years while she did this, but the most recent one is under her new company. But the actual stat, and I thought it was staggering, which is why I pulled it out. When asked which tech company people would be willing to share health data with, 60% said Google, 53% said Amazon, 51% said Microsoft, 49% said Apple, and 40% said Facebook. So, I mean, it was a measurable difference. 20 points below Google and a full 10 points below Apple and Microsoft.
Right.
But to Robert's point, precisely to Robert's point, there was another slide, I don't know which slide this is, page 48 of the report. The percentage of internet users using select platforms greater than once per day globally. 30% use Facebook, 27% use YouTube, 25% use WhatsApp, which is owned by Facebook. 23% use WeChat, and Stuart, I said this to you the other day. Obviously, huge in China, which plays by a completely different set of rules, so it's not like for like here.
Right.
19% use Instagram, which is owned by Facebook. 15% use Facebook Messenger, which is owned by Facebook, right?
Yeah.
So, but what's really fascinating, and I didn't call this out on the podcast, but what's really fascinating is Facebook has gone down a point. And the reason I didn't call this out is I have no idea if these numbers would be statistically significant because there's no methodology behind how they collected the data. But Facebook is down a point. WhatsApp is up 2 points, 25 from 23. Instagram is up 6 points, 19% from 13. And Facebook Messenger is up a point, 15 to 14. So I think, Robert, your instinct on that is exactly right. There's these people who are saying, well, I don't want to use Facebook. I'll just use all this other crap that is also owned by Facebook. Yeah, I think you're onto something there and very right.
And Google, the trust of people trusting Google with their, the 60% with the medical information. I mean, that's got to be a stat that Google went, okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Because they've got, Apple certainly, Apple is trying to take, I wouldn't say disingenuously, but the whole high ground on privacy. Apple's approach to privacy is just, we won't share it. We want all your information and we'll keep it, we'll do stuff with it, but we just won't share it.
Well, no, Apple actually does one thing that's
okay.
really good from a privacy perspective. It's terrible for them from a business perspective, and not in the way you might think. They throw out all Siri queries every 90 days, which is idiotic. It's great from a consumer privacy perspective. It's terrible from a machine learning perspective, right? Regardless of how they use it, regardless of what their business models are, in terms of training the machine out learning algorithms to get smarter, that's really, really, really not a good idea. You strip out the PII that makes it, identifiable and things along those lines, but keep the query data would be a much better approach from my perspective.
So do you think they keep I've seen that. Do you think they keep kind of that data secondarily though, where they've said, okay, I don't know. I'm thinking there's a way that they could.
And I want to be really clear. I could not put my hands on the claim at the moment if I tried. Well, I might be able to, but I haven't tried to put my hands on it at the moment. But they have claimed in the past that they throw out the raw query data every 90 days.
The raw query, I believe, because I think they've refined it down to all the signals, and they keep those.
Maybe
they can index it into certain content.
I don't want to lose the thread on the lack of trusting with Facebook. The article that you put in there, Robert, about Libra. That was for Ed mostly, but yes. Yeah.
Because I know he hasn't been on the show because, you look at the relationship of Ed not being on the show and the rise in Bitcoin and the volatility. I don't know. I think he has other things he's working on.
But
when he's poo-pooing it, he's driving down the share price. Now he's not talking about it; it's rising. So.
Maybe he's like McNamee, where he badmouths it in public, but meanwhile he's doing solid investments behind the scenes.
Has anyone seen Ed St. Ange and Satoshi Nakamoto in the same room together?
The one contention about the article that is that people often wonder why Facebook and Google are being so much about trying to spread the joy of internet everywhere in the world that doesn't have internet now. And there's a fascinating New York Times article that came out a while ago, a couple of years ago, about Facebook's strong efforts of going into third world countries trying to provide internet service, with Facebook being the platform of default for them to go into the internet with, kind of like the old AOL world we used to live in.
Oh yeah. Okay. They're the portal.
Yeah, and how it influenced politics, and how because they can mitigate. They give examples in countries in the Asia Pacific region where political people were shot and killed and so forth because basically hearsay was put into play, and everyone being connected through what they were with Facebook, the sentiment built up and they acted on it. And so now you start putting this currency functionality into it. And I think the article did make a very good point that says, here we are trying to replace the overarching of government, only to replace it with the selectiveness of corporate entities. Where we're taking away our ability to actually influence what we have and actually leave that control to somebody else that controls what we have access to. So I thought, in that sense, it was a great article point. The functionality of it, I mean, what is it over or under that you guys think this is actually going to catch on or just be a dying thought?
I'll go first because I'm the least educated about this at the moment. So my thoughts on this are general and high level, but not at all specific. I don't have a strong opinion on the Facebook currency yet because I haven't read enough about it yet. It is on my list to read. I have been incredibly bullish on mobile payments as a platform for a long time, and it's correct in some places, and I suspect it will be correct everywhere in time. I've just been wrong on the timing to this point. What I find fascinating about cryptocurrencies conceptually, right? And I want to be really clear, I'm not bullish on any specific type of crypto or anything along those lines. But when we talk about blockchain or we talk about distributed ledgers or the like, where I am very bullish on them as a concept is one of the things we have seen from the internet over its entire existence is the rise of distributed trust, right? It used to be, and I mean, the classic example being you wouldn't used to get into cars with strangers because it was dangerous, and now we all get into an Uber all the time, right? Yeah. Because we've enabled a trusted platform to say this car is okay, but this really goes back to eBay being a trusted platform for which you could buy Beanie Babies from people. It goes back to literally, right? I mean, eBay was the first place where I'm going to send money across the internet to some other human being who I've never met before, and I trust that a product is going to show up in my mailbox within a couple of days, right? And so what blockchain does as a fundamental technology, what distributed ledgers do as a distributed technology, as a fundamental technology, it's an infrastructure technology, is they allow for distributed trust in all kinds of transactions, which could be currency, could be something else. And that's powerful, especially in places where they don't have great currencies and they don't have stable governments and all this other kind of stuff. It's also good for criminals. It's also good for, drug dealers. It's also good for...
No central authority has pluses and minuses.
Correct. Yes. Right. When you invent the ship...
As you say, Mr. Tim, when they built the ship,
you build the shipwreck, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean I'm bullish on Bitcoin. It certainly doesn't mean I'm bullish on Facebook's, currency. I do think it's an interesting notion, the way that they've gone about it conceptually, and I still haven't read enough about it to have an educated opinion. But I think it's interesting that Facebook, much like you were just saying in terms of being the internet for people who didn't have it, could certainly be a way to enable trusted transactions and, frankly, monetize that traffic in places where they don't have a really great way to monetize it, especially if their ad revenues take a hit, if there's some sort of regulation down the road. So I think it's a good strategic concept. I have no idea if this is the right way to do it, and I haven't read enough to say whether or not I think it would be successful or not.
So you've got a percentage over and under on whether you think it'll be successful?
Do I?
Yeah.
I in all seriousness, I don't know enough about what they're explicitly trying to do where I would put an over-under. If you ask me, do I think Facebook will iterate to create something that will be successful for them in this area? I'd put the odds at 60% or better. Like they kind of have to do something like this, especially as going back to the Mary Meeker report, everybody's on the internet today, right? We've reached 50% penetration globally. We're almost at 90% in North America. We're at the high 80% in Western Europe. The people who are not on the internet today, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, I mean this more in just a statement of reality way. The people who are not on the internet today are, for all practical purposes, poor, right? They're not people who have the standard of living that we have in North America or Western Europe or the developed parts of Asia or things along those lines, right? And so as those people start to come online, and if I'm Facebook or I'm Google or I'm whoever, I need some way to monetize that because it's ultimately better for me if they're on the internet, but I still need some way to monetize it. So I think it is in their best interest to continually iterate to come up with a solution that works to make that work. And microtransactions could be a way to do that. And so I think that they'll be successful in the long run, or certainly will go down swinging to try to make it so, right?
Well,
yeah, and I'm slightly more bullish than you on this because I think they solve a fundamental problem with cryptocurrency in general, and that's there's trust in terms of it's distributed, but it's very volatile in every case of every cryptocurrency that I'm aware of. Right?
Yeah.
It's peer to peer. Every transaction is, and for you to get out of Bitcoin, you have to find someone that's willing to pay for it, and what they're willing to pay changes day to day. So there's no certainty, there's no confidence that when I buy Bitcoin today for $1,000 or $10,000, that it's going to remain, that value forever. So I think that and the complexity in general has kept a lot of people out of that. It is a significant minority of people that do any kind of cryptocurrency, even investment level, but certainly transacting with it. So one of the things Facebook's doing by tying Libra to an actual currency exchange, when you buy Libra, they put that money that you use into investments, into bonds and low risk investments, so that whenever you want to sell that Libra, they have the money, you go back to them. They're the central exchange. So it takes the advantages of distributed trust through, blockchain, but it adds that confidence that all crypto has lacked until now. So that coupled with the fact that it's Facebook and they're going to be ramming this down your throat in the fact that they've been really successful acquiring and maintaining all these other ecosystems around, that are all owned by Facebook, like you just illustrated, Tim. There's no way in hell this is going to fail. I can't see it.
And just to reply directly to that, I mean, the one place where I'm very bearish on Bitcoin in particular is exactly what you just said. And full disclosure, I wrote a white paper about this for AHNLA a couple years ago about blockchain in travel. So this is something I've spent some time on, but not in over a year. But when you talk about money, I am bearish as hell on Bitcoin as a currency, right? Because when you talk about money, it's exactly what you said. And this is a professor of finance at NYU, David Yermak, said money is supposed to serve three purposes. It functions as a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. Yep. And Bitcoin is not a store of value because the value fluctuates far too much. To fulfill these purposes, currencies must be generally acceptable. These are the criteria of what makes money, right? Generally acceptable, portable, durable, divisible, and uniform, So, I mean, Bitcoin does fail on that level all the time, right?
Yep.
So if, and this is my specific point of, I haven't really looked into Libra, if it could in fact serve as a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value, then I think they're on to something. My point with blockchain is the thing that makes the distributed trust work.
Yep.
And other distributed ledger technologies. Whether or not it will function as currency, I still think blockchain has a lot of value in the long run. In other means, right? So that's really the distinction. And I just don't know enough about Libra to know where it falls on that spectrum of it's good as a distributed trust system on level A. Oh, it works as money on another level, right? That's the part that I haven't done enough research on Libra to feel comfortable.
I think when you go read up on it, you'll kind of come to where I am now, which is that they've solved the fundamental problems in cryptocurrency.
Cool.
Right. And they've got 2.4 billion people on it versus I think Visa has totally
the potential for 2.4 billion, right?
Well, no, they have
2.4 billion people haven't signed up for Libra.
Oh, no, exactly. But that's Facebook's user.
Right.
That's their user thing.
Yep.
Yeah. When you look at Visa's issued 2 billion credit cards. I mean, that's a massive, massive scale. But now, one interesting point, because we did talk about the Meeker report and Libra. These were both articles in last week's show that we didn't talk about any of the news. But that's okay.
I know,
right? Anyway, okay, so one of the things from last week was who the Libra Association is, right? Okay. So they have a variety of groups. On the investment side, you've got Andreessen Horowitz, Union Square Ventures, Ribbit Capital, Thrive Capital, Creative Destruction, really led by Andreessen Horowitz. And blockchain.
Andreessen Horowitz.
Andreessen Horowitz. Blockchain is Coinbase. There are a couple others. Zappo, XAPO, I don't know who that is. Anchorage, Bison Trails, but Coinbase is a pretty big.
Coinbase is huge,
the biggest exchange,
and
they are the.
Somebody tried to buy them. Somebody major tried to buy them. I can't remember who now. Anyway, go on.
An interesting one in social media is Facebook and Calibra. And no one's ever heard of Calibra. Who's that? Oh, it's the company Facebook created to control their crypto. It's just Facebook.
It's right? Facebook and Facebook, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Telecommunications, Vodafone, and Iliad. Not familiar with Iliad.
I know Iliad, yeah.
Yeah, okay. E-commerce, eBay, Farfetch, and Mercado Libre.
Yeah.
Then nonprofits, they've got Women's World Banking, Kiva, Mercy Corps.
Kiva's big. Yep.
Music, Spotify, I've heard of them.
No, who's that?
Yeah. Rideshare, you may have heard of these two, Uber and Lyft. And then travel, Booking Holdings. Only travel player. And then on payments, then I think the interesting one is they've got part of this Libra Association, MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, Stripe, and PayU. I'm not sure about PayU, but those are freaking big.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Monster players.
Yeah, sure. No, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm excited to read about it. I'm actually going into summer reading season here in the next couple of weeks, so I plan to read more about it. But I do think it's a smart idea. Like strategically, it makes a lot of sense for me.
Well, from a functionality point of view, it turns into a universal translator. As things get pushed through Facebook as product, it's a lot easier to just simply use your Libra account to function through that space if you want to. Once they create that commonality of usage, you're not having to worry about payment type, and then you have to go through your process of payment execution. It's a mobile-friendly experience for it. It's a button. Literally, you just say, "Yeah, that's great," boom, bang, and it's done. And that's the commonality to it. Then also, too, from a uniformity point of view, like you mentioned earlier, those that are coming into the internet space, and if they come through this vehicle of value proposition, then no matter where you're from for where it is currency-wise, you have a commonality in which you can put on fair market value as saying that this is how much this is based on currency value for the product. And where now, because of currency exchanges, value propositions, transactions, those values are all over the board depending upon currency strength and everything else. This commonizes that a little bit.
Yeah, this really could become the global currency. It has a shot at that, and that's a really scary thing.
Yeah,
we could be trading oil in Libra in a decade from now.
And the worst part, again, going back to the article point of it, the idea. Oh, Robert left us. Is now we're putting the power of that into corporates. I mean, not that they already don't have that power.
This is the prediction a lot of people have made, right? Like a lot of dystopian, futuristic sci-fi,
right?
But for forever has been the rise of the corporations and how the corporation takes over governments, and what's going to differentiate other than physical borders? I mean, Facebook, for all intents and purposes, it has citizens, it has a currency. It's practically its own sovereignty at this point, or could become. It certainly has more wealth than a lot of nations. Certainly has more political capital and power than a lot of nations. So
that's all right. RoboCop is still going to save us, though.
Well,
from 209, yeah.
Well, it's funny because it's tough to talk about this stuff. It's tough to talk about this stuff without getting into what feel like very science fiction, areas. I remember having this discussion with somebody while I was writing this blockchain white paper that I referenced a moment ago. What is the currency of the United States? The U.S. dollar is the most trusted currency in the world, right? That is a statement of fact, right? The euro is certainly becoming that as a secondary currency. There are other secondary exchange currencies, but the dollar is the central currency for exchange in the world today, right? What determines the value of the dollar?
Nothing, as much as they can want to print it.
Right. It is backed by the full faith of the United States government, right?
It's a fear factor. That's all it is.
Right. By the way, that is true for almost every other currency in the world today. They are fiat currencies. By the way, I want to be very clear before anybody thinks I'm going to become a gold bug and any of that lunacy. I am entirely in favor of fiat currencies. I think they make a ton of sense. There's a lot of reasons why they make a lot of sense, especially compared to, digging rocks up out of the ground and saying that has some intrinsic value. Look, I found a rock. This rock is more valuable than your rock. That doesn't make any damn sense.
Remember Life of Brian, Monty Python.
We're gonna get letters, by the way. Anyway.
If we had viewers, then yes.
No, that's true. That's true. But the point here being, that people trust the dollar because people trust the dollar.
Does.
And the minute you start talking about blockchain, the minute you start talking about cryptocurrencies, the minute you talk about any of these other kinds of things, and you talk about the fact that what they are at their core is a system of distributed trust, right? At their core, that's their purpose. Then you can start to get into things like, well, why shouldn't I trust X over the thing that I've trusted for the last 100 years? And the answer is, maybe you shouldn't. Mm-hmm. Maybe you should. Right? Yeah. So I mean, so it's very easy to transition from this discussion into stuff that sound incredibly far out. Also, 100 years ago, 4 people sitting in vastly different, vastly geographically distributed parts of the country, talking to one another while seeing one another's pictures moving across wireless connections, also sounded like science fiction. So I don't know, man.
You can certainly see the dots between here and there.
You can certainly see the dots between here and there, with the enormous caveat. And I always use this caveat that Bill Gates has one of the great quotes of all time, which is that people always overestimate the change we will see in the next 2 years, and they always underestimate the change we'll see in the next 10. So. Is this going to change the world in the next 2 years? I don't know. Could it change the world in the next 10? It's certainly a possibility. It's certainly one possibility.
If not this, then something like this.
Could certainly be that thing.
Because assimilation is much better than replacement. Replacement requires acceptance of new versus the old. Assimilation is a progression between what you're already accepted into what it transitions into. It's an easier process for people.
Right.
I think that's a good point for sure, because if we look at some of the friction that prevents things like Bitcoin from taking off, I mean, other than the real threats and risks that we talked about, the friction is you have to go and proactively go do it, right? You have to figure out what is Bitcoin, get a wallet. Like you have to spend time and energy
not
and
lose the key to your wallet.
Right. So that there's a lot of steps. Facebook is going to eliminate almost all of that friction because there's going to be a big button right there in the middle of, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, all these things that we've established everyone uses on a daily basis. And they're going to do the same thing they've done with social media and just make it easy for people to transact. It's going to be a couple of clicks.
Well, how does Venmo, people love Venmo, right? Super convenient, great UI. Well, what's the intermediate currency they use for global payment? Nobody knows or cares, right? They go, I paid my, $10 for whatever to the person. They got it. Didn't cost me anything. I think I'm good, right? Yeah. Same thing as, they go to the store, they swipe their credit card, and they go, okay, I paid for that. They don't know anything about interchange or merchant fees or any of that stuff.
Right.
It's super easy, right? Yeah. So, the interesting thing on the blockchain, though, is, and where people get really screwed up, I mean, Bitcoin and its immutability of its distributed ledger and all this sort of thing, it is a proof of work based system. That's what replaces this trust, right? So the software has replaced a central authority, right?
In Bitcoin.
And so
in Bitcoin.
In Bitcoin, right? So these miners
there are other forms.
Yeah, there's proof of stake.
Right.
Proof of stake gets interesting because you go, well, wait a second. What if some of these stakeholders come up and get more of the share they can take over, right? So all these things are kind of problematic. The challenge with Bitcoin and this immutability, though, is it says the system says that was a valid transaction, right? the debits and credits balance, the two accounts or what, that's fine. The ledger is pure, it's good, you can rely on it. Anything else related to it so you can trust that part of the system. But I think in commerce, you kind of want to trust your business partners. And if you buy some goods and services like in travel, you're really kind of hoping it's going to, especially if it's prepaid or something, that it's going to show up later.
Yeah.
When you go there, that's what's going to get this thing, I think, changes a lot of that other structure to go, you've got Visa and MasterCard and all of their merchants and eBay and huge players in this who can suddenly go, but it's not decentralized and nobody in charge. You still have this group. So you've got this little oligopoly of these large organizations.
You have a different type of central bank, right?
Right. You have a new central authority. Right.
Under the auspice is that we're possibly going to lose Tim in about 15 minutes or so. I know there's a couple of articles I would love to know that he would have some insight on. I would love to give you the one that Robert put there about.
Can I tell you why? Can I tell you why Lauren's so engaged? Lauren admitted at the top of the show that he actually looked at the articles and read them Suddenly, he's got this interest in this list of articles.
He's showing off to the other kids. That's exactly what he's doing.
Get to his articles, but then notice the cause that we don't get to the articles.
That's a good point.
All right. So one is, and this only because I thought you put it in there because of Tim, was Hard Rock turns it up to 11. I thought just by itself, that's a merit.
Right. Of course.
Throw into. But really the one that I want to go over and hit is the one about the urban center stuff. I thought it was I enjoyed that article. I enjoyed the article about its focus. It's a numbers thing. It's a rationale about the urbanization value proposition to hotels and the density of the brands related to those urban centers. Main and tertiary markets, and it did a great job.
I bet you liked the pie chart. I bet you enjoyed that pie chart.
Yeah, it was. It was kind of a hand-drawn kind of happiness, but but it was very interesting where it really pointed out some of the fact that Marriott and Hilton, big players, they have over 50% of all urbanization of inventory for hotels, and that's centric to the value proposition. And then in some markets, Marriott has over 50% control of inventory to market. That's powerful combinations when you think about it. We talk about brand saturation and brand value and the degradation of brand identity. And here you are sitting on some of these urban centers where the inventory is in complete control of a brand because you can't talk about rate issues, but by the same token, you create great collaboration. You can create brand collaboration, I should say, not rate collaboration, brand collaboration, where you have walking capabilities, retransfers of demand based on what your occupancy's availabilities are, so forth and so on. Where
lots of data as well.
Plus a boatload of data, But anyways, that's the article I really hope that I wanted to grab onto because I like that article. I thought it was a cool.
For anyone that wonders why Marriott has a gazillion different brands, that right there is exactly why.
Well, right. The brands don't exist for consumers; they exist for developers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right, because I've got an AOP on my Hilton Garden Inn, so I need something else I can put across the street. Right.
Yep.
I skimmed the article. I haven't read it in gross detail yet. I certainly think that Marriott and Hilton have a strong position. Obviously, I don't know when we talk about duopolies like Expedia and Orbitz. Good Lord, where'd that come from?
Sean, where'd it come from?
He's doing that way back machine from earlier.
I stepped into my time machine for a second. Exactly. Yeah. But when we talk about Expedia and Booking and their dominance, and we think about how much of the third-party business they drive into hotels, it is not a little bit over 50%. It is 80%, 90%. Right, easily. I think it's something that people should pay attention to. I think you should especially pay attention to it if you happen to be in one of those markets. But I mean, their share of room count as a whole is what Marriott's at like 8% of room share around the world. Right. Hilton's at like 6%. Their ability to shape things outside of an individual market. I don't know. I think if I'm outside of that market, I
Well,
wouldn't worry about it. If I'm in that market, I would pay close attention to it.
To your point, there is one thing there, and that is the unaffiliated, the soft brand collaborations.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of things there, right?
That does show that it isn't totally controllable to your point, controllable by brand only, but in certain markets, I think the point that I got out of it that was really neat was in certain markets, it is the dominant force. It is the controlling entity.
Sure.
When it comes to that.
But at 51%, I mean, I don't know. I think it's worth watching. I think it could become an issue. This is really interesting because the thing that you always want to watch for that we're starting to see. So there was an antitrust investigator, somebody from the FTC gave a speech. FTC or Department of Justice, I can't remember. One of the top antitrust folks in the U.S. government gave a speech at a conference about 2 weeks ago that was really fascinating because it signaled a fairly significant shift in the way that the U.S.'s regulatory scheme tends to think about antitrust. Historically, antitrust has been, for the last 40 years in the U.S., 35 years in the U.S., antitrust has been identified as, consumer harm, and and you can tell because there's price impacts, right? And if the price doesn't go up to consumers, then clearly there is no impact from an antitrust perspective. And this speech that the regulator gave, and I would look it up if I could remember the guy's name, was that Google and Facebook may in fact be committing some antitrust violations, even though there's no harm to consumers from a pricing perspective. And they're starting to look at things like, instead of monopoly, monopsony, which is something that not a lot of people talk about very often, right? So monopoly is when there's only one vendor from whom you can buy. Monopsony is when there's only one purchaser to whom you can sell. And that has obvious anti-competitive possibility of anti-competitive practices, because if I'm a real estate owner and I want to build a hotel and my only option is Marriott or Hilton, then maybe you have a case for monopsony or duopsony being a problem, and if they're acting in an anti-competitive basis. So, I don't know. I think it's something to pay attention to. I think it's something to be aware, but I don't know. I see lots of cool independent hotels popping up in lots of cool places, going head to head with Hilton and Marriott and everybody else. And I would only worry about it when we start to see developers be in a position where the only game in town they can go to get money from the bank is Marriott. And I don't see that as being a reality at this point, personally.
Yeah.
And much to Stuart's point, there are a lot of independent hotels out there right now who are just crushing it because they have the ability to get access to tools and the ability to get access to a marketplace in a very different way than we've seen historically. And so I think that's terribly exciting, personally.
Yeah, it's easier than ever to compete on a level playing field with these guys because technology is cheaper, it's more sophisticated. You have access to tools on par with these big brands without having to fork out millions of dollars in R&D.
Yeah,
and in all honesty, you have ability to utilize them more effectively than the brands because the brands have to do this self-limiting. Everything has to be
for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you can be more agile. You can test and learn much quicker, for sure.
And you have the ability to truly differentiate yourself rather than looking like exactly other chain room in town, right? I mean,
for
so
sure.
that would be my quick take on it.
Which brings me to another article that Robert put in there that I completely...
Wait. I want to... Robert didn't get a chance to chime in on that one. Robert,
sorry.
I think there are two issues. One is in a downturn. Can Marriott and Hilton keep those properties fed in those urban centers, right? Because that starts putting a lot of pressure because, or will the owners and management companies start looking at this and going, wait a second, they're getting credit for a bunch of stuff that they don't necessarily drive, right? They're the only channel that can go through, like a GDS, they're getting credit for all the corporate stuff. Maybe that's not it. The other one that I thought particularly for Tim was there's a quote down at the bottom regarding preferred, and I thought preferred at 2.4% was, pretty interesting. That's pretty high, but what did he say? Preferred, which is perhaps the original soft brand, I think the leading hotels people might take exception to that assessment.
Might take some umbrage, yes. Given that
considering they had
started in 1928.
Oh, I thought it was 36, but okay, if it was 28, so they had a 50.
1928, the leading hotels of Europe and Africa. There were 9 original hotels.
There you
9,
go.
I think there were 9. The King David in Jerusalem, one in Cairo that I can't think of the name of that I ought to be able to. Sorry, I'm blanking on this. I used to be able to do this all off the top of my head. But literally where it started out was 8 or 9 hotels in Europe and Africa, specifically the one in Egypt.
So it was only a 40-year.
Banded together to open a sales office in New York City and pool their resources by hiring, 1 or 2 salespeople instead of them each having their own salesperson in New York City. And that is the origins of the leading hotels of the world in 1928, just in time for the stock market crash to come. The first 10 years of leading were a little interesting,
Squeaking ahead of Preferred's founding 40 years later.
40 years later, exactly right. Yeah, exactly. We just got in under the wire.
Well, the other article that I wanted to point out that you thrown in there, Robert, that I completely disagree with and thought was relatively useless, was the one.
I sometimes do throw in ones like that on purpose. So.
Yes. The Hospitality Net article, where it's talking about Airbnb, Expedia, Google, 4 lessons the hotel industry can learn from the digital giants.
Yes.
I don't know anything in there that's actually even. I mean, maybe I just read it with a skeptic's eye, but I'm reading going, this is nothing's actionable here and nothing's usable. This is you're trying to say that this orange can be an apple, and it's not. It's still going to be an orange. It doesn't. They don't apply to each other. And most importantly, it's like, what are you going to do about this? Unless you're Marriott reading this article going, oh yeah, we can maybe do something like that. There's no value proposition to this.
Right.
Oh, I don't. Go ahead, Robert.
No, go ahead.
No. It's okay.
No, you guys discuss. I won't discuss why I put it in there until the end. Go ahead.
So I think a couple of these very much apply. One, I agree about the meaningful brand architecture, but I would, it's more relevant to a chain than it is to an individual property. I also say that it speaks to the necessary to really differentiate yourself. And I mean, it goes back to what we were just talking about with independent hotels, right? There's a lot of sameness out there, right? One of the reasons people like Airbnb is because this is truly different. This is truly distinct when I go stay in this person's home or I go stay in this, apartment that I'm renting or something along those lines. And, when we talk about independent hotels who are killing it, when we talk about properties that are doing a really good job, they tend to because they actually, have set themselves apart in a meaningful way. My favorite definition of differentiation, I have to give credit to my buddy Mike Moran for this. I wish I'd come up with this one because it's brilliant. Is differentiation is not what makes you different. Differentiation is a difference that customers will pay for. Right? If people aren't going to be willing to pay more for it, just being different for its own sake is of no value whatsoever. And so I thought that first item was really about, you genuinely have to differentiate in a way that people are going to be willing to pay for. Clearly, number 2 is important because you got to focus on travelers. And I think how many times on this show have we had the debate about, are we in the hospitality business or are we in the real estate business?
Yes.
Right? And if you're in the hospitality business and you're not focused on travelers, you're not in the hospitality business, right? You're completely ignoring that. And then the third one, and this gets directly to what Robert was talking about a moment ago, which I think is a brilliant, brilliant point. Where they say successful franchisees lead to successful hotel corporations. I think when we hit the downturn, Robert, I think you're exactly right. You're going to get a lot of franchisees. You're going to get a lot of hotel operators, a lot of hotel owners starting to ask questions about, man, my franchise fees are high. Why am I paying you all this money? And should I be? So I think
and they have been growing. They have been growing faster than revenues for the last few years too, right? So that's
for at least some of the franchisors, that's absolutely true. Yeah. So I think that's a real question that again, if you're a property owner and you're reading this, and you are a franchised property owner in particular and you're reading this, again, I might look at this and start to ask the question of, A, am I on the right flag? And B, should I be on a flag at all? The answer for many may be yes and yes, but the answer for some might be, yes, I should have a flag, but maybe not this one. Or the answer might be, maybe I shouldn't have a flag at all. Or the answer might be, yeah, this flag is providing value to me because they're doing these things well. So I'm not going to say it's my favorite article of all time, but I do think there are lessons there that anybody can take away and say, you know what, this is something I can use. Robert, why'd you put it in?
Because every point was Airbnb. That was purely for Stuart's benefit.
Basically, you're trolling Stuart, is what you're saying.
That was a troll Stuart article.
Hey, the other large article, other than the Rutrow, that I hope Tim has time for, is the one about Expedia.
Before we jump ahead, Stuart, did you have any specific point on that, or you're like, nah, screw it, it's an Airbnb article?
It said Airbnb in the subject, so I didn't read it. I'm kidding. I do agree actually a little bit with Lauren in terms of the content was a little shallow and generic. But let's face it, 90% of what's written in the industry right now is shallow and generic. So there wasn't anything revolutionary, but I think the 4 points were, commonsensical but accurate.
The other article, hopefully that Tim has a few minutes more for, is the Expedia Group ruling out charging commissions on hotel resort fees and the impact of where they're ranked within the listing, the sorting order, the fees versus no fees. Okay, so we're not going to get fees on your fees, but we are going to drop you in rank.
Well, I thought they said they weren't going to. I thought they said they weren't going to charge them. Period.
Well, no, they aren't going to charge a commission on the resort fee. That was the one that.
Right.
The booking started saying, hey, if you're charging this, we're going to include that in there. So right. Expedia is going to be kinder and gentler and say, we aren't going to do this, probably because on any sort of commissionable booking after the fact, that's going to be very hard to compel the hotel to pay.
It is. Yeah. But they're going to dim you. Again, Expedia is going to find a way to penalize you if you don't follow their exact rules.
Right.
Could
they be the killer of resort fees? Could they be actually the catalyst that people would say, you know what? I'm so far down the food chain, I can't get in.
Well, no. I think all they're going to do is they're going to I think Expedia, all these guys are going to push to calculating. Here's your total rate, so know the thing, because all these guys, I commented, there was a tweet yesterday that I basically said, I will, as I've said many times, I will debate anyone, anytime, anywhere on the merit of resort fees. But what I normally do is once somebody's interested in that offer, I then tell them they have to pay my travel expenses and everything. And they really hate having that drip pricing approach brought in.
That's hilarious, dude.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, Robert. That is brilliant.
Very clever.
That is really worthy.
That is fantastic.
That was Tim Peter-esque. That took me 6 weeks to come up with, but just to try to get a Tim Peter type book. So.
No, that's brilliant. I am
that is impressive.
Humble. That is very well done. I think we've said all on that.
But anyway, Expedia.
Boom! Mic drop from Robert, man.
Expedia hates these things, right? It confuses people. Expedia gets blamed when people don't. Yeah. But Expedia doesn't like it because people get pissed off at them, going, "Oh, I didn't understand," or "This is it," or "It wasn't. Why am I paying $30? I didn't get anything." And they want that to go away because it reflects on them, right?
And probably, I'm not the only one in strategy that does this, but I'll waive the dang fee direct channel wise. I penalize the OTA channel with the facility fees and stuff. They have to if they book through them, they have facility fees. They book directly with me.
But why?
I don't want them at all.
That's a big
my clients want the money. I'm just
make
saying
it go away. Make it go away.
No, I'm with you. Do.
Give the guest a great value and charge them an appropriate price. I mean,
I hate them.
Yeah.
I hate
It's a
this
mandatory
concept.
fee. It's drip
I hate
pricing.
fees. I've been screaming this for years, but since the client still wants to charge for the damn things, at least I made a session of saying, well, let's use it as a strategy point. It's you'd like to get more direct channel bookings, less cost to you, so waive the fee for me, then I can sell that.
Not only I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, not only is that likely to hurt your placement, it probably should.
Yeah,
because it's deceptive and it's crap. Charge the guest what you're going to charge the. I mean, I can't top what Robert just said. What Robert just said is the smartest thing I've heard on this in years. Raise the goddamn price. I mean,
I'm with you, but I don't own the hotel, so I have to listen to the fact that do this. At least let me take Expedia off of your direct channel.
But Expedia is finally getting it. Expedia is finally getting it and figuring out. We can do something about this if these guys are not behaving properly and throwing this in. You know what? They should be down because they're more expensive than this.
Right.
Which is why they're doing it. They want to be higher on the sort order because they look cheaper. Right.
Tim, you're also protecting the same people that cut us from underneath the legs with rate parity issues. You can't have both sides of the same conversation. They're the same people out there that are screwing us over on rate parity. So somewhere we have to leverage back and say,
Expedia has never wanted
hotels.com, all the rest. Yeah.
That's on their rates. No. The whole rate parity thing, they never wanted it from the beginning, right? From day one. Now they always use the low price guarantee, which is a totally different thing, right? You find something else will match it. That was the hotel reservations network pre-hotels.com.
Right.
The thing with rate parity, the hoteliers decided they're the ones who, peed in the pool, right? And said, okay, hey, we can charge lower prices directly. So look at this, aren't we clever? And now it's the revenge of the OTAs going, oh, you want it to be a closed group? Somebody stayed at any hotel, any of your hotels at any time, and now you can cut them a deal. Fine. We got a whole pile of people who book air flights who never stayed in a hotel or whatever. We can do the same, right? Yeah. And we can go find closed groups like Target. And guess what? We're going to give them 10% off, and you can't do anything about it. So
is this the new Robert Cole?
I want to jump in on this for one more second because there's a point of history here that matters too. Plus, getting away from rate parity was the dumbest thing that hotels have ever done in the history of online distribution. By far. And it's so dumb, people didn't realize how dumb it was for too long. The reason it is dumb is it always benefited the OTAs. And it always benefited the OTAs because what you taught the consumer from the day that digital started with online travel was if you keep shopping around, there's a better rate out there to be found. Mm-hmm. And the risk is not that they book you on Expedia and pay a lower rate than they pay direct. The risk is that they book another damn property altogether.
Right.
The fact that we taught customers, hey, you came to our website, but look around, there's going to be a lower price out there, is ridiculously stupid. Stupid. And it has hurt the industry for 20 years. And that's why I get pissed about it, because I've been having this argument for 20 years.
Right.
It is
the low price guarantee.
Right.
And they made the low price guarantee not be exposed.
Right, with all these disclosures, all these exclusions, and all these
Hey, the apex of it, remember when we had the fuel price crisis?
Wait, hold on one second. Charge your guest a good rate that offers them good value, and they will come back to you again and again.
On it.
Jim is talking crazy again. Oh my God.
The apex of our stupidity was during the fuel crisis stuff. Remember where we were adding a fuel fee on top of a resort fee? It was like, really? Is there going to be electricity fee, cable fee coming on now? I mean, it's like, where do you start fragmenting these additional fee funds from? I'm a huge advocate of one great price.
The hotel industry blindly follows the airline industry. And the problem is they do not have control over the origin destination nonstop markets. Flat out, right? It's, if you can offer a nonstop flight, you can kind of call the shots because someone else has to, they got to stop somewhere, and that's inconvenient. really different for
Like
hotels.
Charlotte in the middle of a cancellation where the density of the people was so much you couldn't walk out of the gate because the walkway was full of people and they had no space to walk anywhere else. That kind of place.
It increases risk. A connection increases risk. If you reduce risk through a nonstop, you should get a price premium. Simple economics, right?
Here's the thing, though, guys, because I agree with 100% of everything you just said. How stupid the rate parity situation is. How stupid resort fees are. Like, I agree 100%. But getting from where we are to where we should be is going to be almost impossible because you can't. Unless regulation comes in, rate parity is in the situation it's in. Yeah. So we've got to deal with it the best we can. And resort fees, it's really hard. I work with a lot of clients. They're resorts that have resort fees that are making millions and millions and millions of dollars a year from that fee. So to go to them and say, stop it because it's bad.
Be the good guy.
They're going to just look at their financials and laugh in your face and say, I'm not stopping this. This is free money. Why would I ever stop it? So,
but it's not. Right. It's a mandatory fee, so it should be part of your rate. And the local jurisdictions
absolutely in a perfect
charging them as room occupancy.
Legislation is the only
it's got to be regulated. It's a federal Federal Trade Commission, states attorneys generals, and at least until 2020 with a hotelier in the White House, highly unlikely that will occur. Yeah.
What Expedia is doing, and I've seen articles come out since Expedia took their stance and say, Expedia is going to be what is the death of resort fees. No, it's not, because it's not a big enough slap for people. It's not painful enough.
And that's what I was asking. Is this the beginning of an argument against it? Because hotels
it's an argument against it.
Yeah, it's one small argument against it. It won't stop it.
But
we had 26.
What you just said, the only place I would push back at all on what you said, first of all, I agree. I work with some resorts. I understand this completely. I also say that what we're trying to do when we're having these conversations with the folks we work with is start to wean them not away from the revenue, but away from acquiring it that way. Because when the regulation comes in, it's going to go away completely. And they're going to be in a position of, oh, crap, now what do we do?
Right. And what I was saying was that I use it as a marketing tool that if this is one small step for man kind of thing, if I can get some convincing to waiver that off of the direct channel because the cost savings is not being on ultra, then it's a leverage point. Because to Stuart's point, I can't get my client off of it. It's free freaking money. It's like the airlines with the baggage claim, the baggage stuff. It's money in the bank.
It's the opposite of that, though. It's actually the opposite of the airline stuff. The airline, they unbundled their product and they said, hey, if you want to optionally bring a bag or you want to optionally select your seat or you optionally want to use the overhead or the restroom or, sit down while you're flying or whatever it gets to, right?
That's not unbundling, Robert.
You can do that.
Just slicing out what you already were giving them.
Right, but you have the option of whether you get it. Like you have the transportation, but anything else you pay for because it improves your experience.
I'll make one contention to that. The economy tickets are a choice whether you don't want to bring a bag. But your ticket, you still have a space to put a bag. You're still including.
But you only have these 5 seats to pick, right? And now if you want to sit in a good seat, you have to pay an extra $20.
I know there's a difference to it, but the point of it is it's free money for what they were already doing.
No.
It's not the same as the airline.
Wait,
they unbundled it
because again, forget the airlines. It's not free money because you are pissing off a lot of guests.
Yes, I will agree with that. I will agree with that.
For a number of
guests. There should be zero revenue impact. Zero revenue impact.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the reality is, I would ask people to look at things like, what do we see in terms of repeat stays? What do we see in terms of loyalty? What do we see in terms of net promoter score and in terms of likelihood to recommend, et cetera, when people get hit with these fees after the fact? It is absolutely a problem that, because we're not seeing it hit the bottom line, at the immediate moment, I think people fail to recognize the impact it's having on the guest experience and their ability to recommend and things along those lines.
So I propose someone should A/B test it, charge half of their guests a resort fee and half of them not on a higher rate, and just see what happens.
I like Robert's example. He'll argue anywhere, any place.
Robert still wins the prize.
He wins the prize on that one, man.
Quarter of the day.
If other people are misbehaving and the presentation of the fee is after the fact in the booking funnel sort of thing, yes, you will wind up being penalized and or you will not get as much traffic. But the other problem is I just look at it as if you have a direct conversation and explain to a guest why they have to pay this resort fee for Wi-Fi, you get all this stuff. They start saying, I'm not going to use the health club. I'm not going to do this. Why are you making me pay for that stuff? I'm not going to use the Wi-Fi. I'll use my hotspot off my phone.
Right.
And you lose those arguments every time because it is the antithesis of the airlines, right?
So we're at a point where we can do the rut row, but Holly piped in just to say this was more heated than the dem debates.
I didn't look at the chat. Did Holly comment on my haircut? Holly, I cut my hair for you. I'm not going to grow it down to my lower
He was
back.
going to put a rat tail on it, though. I think he's saving space for a rat tail.
I'd like to point out that once upon a time there was a little girl who was charged resort fees, and I was that little girl.
That little girl. Hey, well, you know what? From a strategy point of view, that was a brilliant mic drop for her. That was a great stand out of the crowd moment for her. Now the fact she's selling T-shirts, I don't know, but.
No. The planned one that she had was the food fight versus the food on the table. That was certainly rehearsed and tested and everything.
Oh, by far.
But she executed it very, very well. She delivered.
You almost saw her go, this is the time I can drop it right there. She was so rehearsed.
Oh, no, she was. She was, and she took, and she really waited for, I'm going to use it if I have to, but not.
The greatest one out of all the debates was Yusu or no John Kennedy. I know John Kennedy, Yusu or no John Kennedy. I mean, that's still the key one. That's the best one yet. So,
the rut row.
Yeah, rut row. Let's do rut row.
So
wait, the debate wasn't the rut row?
Okay. No, the debate wasn't the rut row.
I'm afraid that the next 18 months are the rut row. Nonetheless, November 7th, 2020 could be the rut row. Anyway.
I liked on the rut row purely Bloomberg Business Week's headline writers, whoever the headline editor is, was brilliant here. The hotel hackers are hiding in the remote control curtains. So I think that's quite the image. So. It basically said the subhead was the back doors to your personal data can be found in everything from smart fish tanks to pineapples. And I've used the MGM fish tank hack. Previously.
Well, I think they made a really good point that brand is responsible for certain levels of technology, but the hotel owner is responsible for a lot of the latent technology at property level, the door keys and so forth. And they're always on that thin line of profitability, so they're keeping them up to date or keeping them under control or something. I think that was a great point, that there is too many people in control of too many variables for any one person to go and say, hey, guys, all these things, are they all sealed up and closed up and people can't access this versus that kind of stuff? But they also made another great point about the fact that you go online, you still log into people's PMS systems because they leave them on open source online, which is absurd that you're just going to use your password and get past the wall.
We underinvest in security.
I didn't mean to surprise you with that.
Say it isn't so. Wait, stop. No.
Yeah, but I mean,
So I'll tell you a story, and this is really scary for me as a consumer, but it's been really interesting as a vendor. So one of Fuel's products is a mobile app, and we've recently added digital key functionality to it, right? So our first integration was with ASSA Abloy. So if anyone's using ASSA Abloy locks with the low light Bluetooth functionality, they can use our app now to open the doors, which is really cool. But in order to certify with ASSA Abloy, you actually had to fly a developer out to Europe to their headquarters and go through a week-length training session in development where they would look through every line of code. Then the certification program itself, once they came back, was they went through literally line by line of code, looking for exploits, looking for specific regulations that they enforce on how third-party vendors can interact with their logs. Like really rigorous, really stringent, really good, right? Makes me feel great as a consumer. ASSA Abloy was the first one we did. So we just assumed all the lock manufacturers would be this stringent. We've since, and I'm not going to name them because I don't want to get sued, but the other ones we've dealt with and their major lock brands have none of this. They're just, here's our SDK, have at it.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
That is freaky scary, dude. Freaky scary.
And how hard is it to get a little line of code or a little piece of JavaScript or something in someone's mobile app or this or that? Or wouldn't it be great to integrate with? And that's kind of what the point of this is. You've got all this Internet of Things stuff. Like, well, wouldn't it be great if you could turn on the TV just using the same, kind of beacon, Bluetooth stuff? Yep. Wouldn't that be cool and not have to go through the system? You could just have it directly because if anything's down with the Wi-Fi, it'd still work. And it's like, oh yeah, watch out. And a lot of these lock guys, well, I think, was it Asa Abloy or one of the companies they acquired that you never want to have a hacker convention in your hotel. Really, it may seem like good business during a valley period, but all of a sudden you are the test case, right, for these guys running. Yeah. And these guys had some sort of little pen type device, which I don't know what it did, but you put it in the the outlet of the thing, and all of a sudden they were doing like these brute force attacks. Yeah. And they were going, oh, yeah, we could run through all the combinations because it's whatever bit or a 12-bit code or whatever. You got to do it for about 90 seconds. But it's, we get it and we crack it like that. And they were cracking things. They go to 2 locks. And all of a sudden they could figure out what the pass key was for the housekeeper or something. I mean, you're just like, oh, my God, this is.
I mean, I've seen it. I've personally seen it where I've seen the back of the house network available on the Wi-Fi, and that you go in, it goes right to the user pass screen for their interface. Right. And I'm like, as a guest of the hotel, I'm going, really? If I really want to spend some time on this,
Well, and you go look at the default, right? You go, oh, is that an admin, password type scenario for just before you're set up? Because who knows when the thing was last rebooted, they had to go do whatever, they had some outage, and
another caveat. I'll add another caveat to this. Whenever I take on new clients, one of the first things I ask them to do is for us to do an audit on all of their platforms and who's still connected to them. Just a connectivity audit. And I've never yet been disappointed with the fact that their PPC, their analytics, their social platforms, their whatever it is, has debris of past of people that have access to it still. Past employees, past vendors, past whatever. And we send them a list going, who are all these people? And they're like, well, we don't know. I said, well, these are all the people that have access to your analytics. I mean, it's crazy. It is crazy how it's extended.
I still have, this is no joke, I still have access. I should probably send them an email about this, but I still have access via analytics to a client, not to a client, to a prospect who I talked to years ago, who gave me access to analytics so I could put together a proposal. They opted not to go with us for whatever reason. They hired somebody else, and yet I still have access to all
we have to say, and God love Tim because he can charge these prices, but the $50,000 per week just retainer to get his, so then he can start working with you,
and it wouldn't be as bad if he didn't add resort fees on top of that.
That's right.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
All right, Robert, Holly says your hair looks lovely.
Oh, thank you, Holly. It was for you.
The one thing I would encourage.
I'll send Jalen your compliments.
Not that this hasn't been brought up many times in terms of the costs and things like that, and the risk and all this other kind of stuff. I would just look to all these situations you're running into these days with the hospital in San Diego and with Baltimore City Services and things along those lines, where the I forget what they call it, but it's basically blackmail, where they lock you out of your own systems.
Absolutely.
And you're only going to want to pay for this one time, so you might want to pay for it before it costs you a whole bunch of money. But this is something where, as an industry, and I don't think hospitality is necessarily any worse here than many other industries. Certainly not all industries, but many other industries are doing a crap job of this, and it's going to come
yeah.
back to bite them hard. And we're starting to see examples of that. And, so, I always use this. There's an IBM risk matrix that I've used for years. And I don't know if they created it, but it's where I first came across it, 20 years ago, of what is the likelihood something that will occur, high, medium, low, and what is the impact to your business if it does occur, high, medium, low. And if somebody got access to your PM system, or somebody got access to locking all your guests out of all of your rooms and all your housekeepers out of all your rooms, and people got access to, your POS and things along those lines, what's the likelihood that occurs, and what's the impact, and put an economic value on that, and build that into your budget for 2020, because
and the low frequency, high severity stuff is really that's the tricky. Probability is really low, but the consequences are huge.
The consequences are we're out of business. Right?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I use a project platform called Teamwork, and any good project platform has a risk assessment to tasks as well. And I get clients ask us, why are you filling out what's this risk number? I said, one, if we don't do it on time, what's the risk factor of that actually happening, and what's the impact of it if we don't hit it on time, so that we know the prioritization from all of this. And to the point of that, things, audits and security checks and stuff like that always go as high risk, high value. For all the stuff we put in there, that's a key element to our project platform, because it's like, we got to make sure that when we change accesses and so forth, I send out courtesy letters to get clients after we're done working with them and so forth, saying, I'm still getting your data, I'm still connected. If you want me to be, because you think you're going to use my services again, fine. But if we're done, I would recommend that you go back through, just like we did when we first joined you, and clean out the fact that I don't need access to your stuff anymore. Right. But it still falls on deaf ears. I mean, I'm still getting access to stuff.
Well, I mean, it's a situation of I really think there are, two types of companies in the world, right? Those that have been hacked and those that will, right? Yeah. And at a minimum, I always think of like the LoJack approach. Like LoJack does nothing when they have found that when people have LoJack in a neighborhood, the incidence of car thefts in that neighborhood do not go down. Just the incidence of car theft for you goes down a lot, right? Simply, you've just raised the cost to the car thief of stealing your car. You haven't raised the cost to them for stealing all cars,
right?
Figure out what the LoJack is.
Sticker in your window, right?
Correct. Sort of exactly.
In your yard.
Exactly. Raise the cost.
Find an easier target.
Right.
And it still does. Yeah, right. It's still driving me crazy, because I'm still trying to take our own advice. It's like, I'm trying to get off of that singular password on multiple platforms. I use encryption now. I use a single entity to hold it, but I still am lazy with my familiar accounts that I tend to keep a series of passwords I rotate between. But they're all frequently used passwords. But I'm trying to get off of those things, and every time I do stuff now with the two-factor authentication, drives me nuts. Yeah. I'm like, oh crap, I gotta go through that again. But I'm so happy when I see stuff like, I have to do that factor. At least there's a little extra layer on there. It doesn't solve it. It's just a little extra something that's more challenging.
Have you seen? And by the way, I don't claim to be a security expert. This is not really my area of expertise by any stretch. But I just read a thing the other day that I thought was fascinating, and it appealed to me because I really pay attention to customer behavior, consumer behavior, right? How people act. And apparently, Microsoft, in its most recent in the next version of Windows, or in the next security update to Windows, or something along those lines, for the admins, for whatever it is, the status where it requires password changes every 6 months or whatever is turned off by default for the first time ever, because they have found that making people change their password regularly is a greater security risk. You're actually better off coming up with one super secure password that you never change, unless there's an incident where people break in, because they find when people have to change their passwords all the time, they end up choosing really crappy passwords. I think they're easy to remember, and so you're much better off using something like a 1Password, or like a LastPass, or something like that.
LastPass,
one of those kinds of things. And having it set, just a random string of characters that A, you never have to remember, and B, is very tough to crack, and just leaving it forever, because, if somebody hasn't hacked it, you've got the LoJack. It's too hard for people to hack that one. Just leave it alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I know that some of the platforms
I believe there's there's a Chrome extension. I think it's called Password Checkup. I'd have to look at it. But it basically has a list and it cross-references everyone who's been hacked. And when you go onto a website,
Password has
where
that
they have
too.
a
It'll tell
problem,
you at-risk ones. Yeah, it's called Watchtower. It'll go through and say, hey, these passwords that you're using on these accounts that we have information on, that password's out in the market. They know that password's associated with you. You know, and that's the ones I try to go tackle and go through with it. But I mean, you know, even still on some things, like for client side things, I do things where all of the people that I have access to the accounts that we create universal access to our client accounts are opaque. When they go to log in, they use RoboForm as one of the platforms. And they don't see the user password. It's all dots. So the only person that ever saw the password when we first got it was me when I had them add the account. And so and then I turn them on and off on access. So we even try to add an extra layer on our side that when we're accessing client information, even the people that I have working on it don't necessarily see that user and password functionality.
Right. Yeah.
That's smart. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are at the 2-hour mark.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Mr. Tim, thank you for burning off your lunch. Because I know. And by the way, did you get a new camera? Because you're in crystal clear resolution today. You're looking sharp.
Did I get a new camera?
Yeah.
No, it's my. I use the camera that is built into my laptop.
It's doing its job today.
I've had the same laptop for 2 years. I brushed my hair. That might have helped.
Well, I think you parted it different. Maybe it's a change in the part. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe Robert's new haircut makes him look better.
Yeah, maybe that's it. No, just the resolution is nice and crisp. Like it's got a high def on it. It's pretty nice. Where Mr. Robert,
maybe Comcast isn't like screwing my bandwidth for a change. That would be nice.
I'm fighting my bandwidth with CenturyLink right now. And by the way, this is our first broadcasting onto LinkedIn, but I seem to be hitting walls with it. I think there's a time duration that you can run on LinkedIn, which I don't know yet. I thought it was 20 minutes or so or whatever, but it seems to be varying because anyway. So, Mr. Butler, if you want to know about Fuel Travel, your podcast, anything else Fuel Travel does,
that may be the ultimate site that we only want to broadcast on. Just saying.
LinkedIn, right? Yeah. And Facebook doesn't own that one yet. Microsoft does. So, Fuel Travel is the mothership. So, fueltravel.com. Twitter is /Fuel Travel. I think we're Fuel Travel on Facebook as well. So just put Fuel Travel, stick it anywhere you want, and you'll find it. And you can find the podcast at fueltravel.com/podcast. And the awesome travel study that we just published and gave out at High Tech is getting ready to launch on our website next week at fueltravel.com/study. So if you want a lot of insights on cool consumer behavior stuff, then fueltravel.com/study will be available probably on Monday, would be my guess. Yeah.
I'll put the link on the show notes with it as well. Because like I said, we're on Monday, Tuesdays, we're going out to, I do a live broadcast now, which is odd hours for APAC and EU. But then I do a rebroadcast on their Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter platforms on a scheduled one where I take the broadcast and put the lower thirds and all the stuff that you see, intro and closes and stuff. So that goes out on Monday, Tuesday now for them. So I'll make sure the link is on the show notes for that as well. Mr. Robert Cole, sir.
Robert K. Cole on social media or rockcheetah.com.
And you will go anywhere, anytime to debate.
Any place. Yep. All talk resources.
That is the key function of today's show.
I'm totally going to steal that, Robert.
Oh my God. I've already stolen it twice during this episode.
And Mr. Tim Peter, sir, where is it they can find you and your amazing podcast?
TimPeter.com for everything. TimPeter.com/podcast for the podcast. I'm Tim Peter on most social media platforms except for Twitter, which for some reason I am at TC Peter, but you can find me there as well.
And
where can people find you, Lauren?
Well, right now, currently still will be hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. For the show notes, and all previous other shows, it is hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. Very short URL, easy to type. Nobody misspells it. It's not a problem.
So related to that, I was talking to a guy that's with a management group this past week, and I said, hey, you should come on this show. We do it every Friday. at 11:30 Eastern. It'd be interesting for you to come and tell us what you guys have going on. They're a fairly new management company, and they've been picking up a few interesting properties. And he said, okay, where do I want to go see the show before I come on? And I said, hey, this is the URL, hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/show. And he's like, that's the longest URL I've ever heard. I was like, funny you should say that. We kind of make fun of Lauren every single week about the length of his URL.
We will be migrating it to a shorter URL, which is yet to be determined since I can't seem to get a consensus of appreciation of naming it on some of the ones I've bought. So I'm still looking for the magical URL that everyone says, oh, that's pretty good. We'll do that one.
I know we've gone very long. I know we're trying to wrap, but I have to tell one funny story. When I was at Leading, this is pure digression. When I was at Leading, I'm sure this is outside the statute of limitations. Leading Hotels has had a problem for years in that the brand itself cannot be trademarked, right? Because it is too generic a term. So we'd had, literally for about 10 minutes, we had a discussion once about, should we talk about changing the name of the company to something that was trademarkable, right? And I remember at some point in the discussion, people were, and there's a lot of emotion. It was an 80-year-old brand. It's something people loved, et cetera. And this was just pure float a trial balloon about, is this a good idea or not? And I happened to mention, we own lhw.com as the domain, and I'd sure hate to get rid of that because it's real tough to come by, 2 with 3-letter domains. Mm-hmm. And literally that ended the discussion. And I didn't mean it to. I was just throwing it out there as a thing, and everyone, oh yeah, no, we don't want to lose that. Never mind, forget it. And then we moved on.
Tim, the killer of brand conversations.
That was about a decade ago. So if you see Leading change its name anywhere in the next couple of days, that was all in progress long after I left. So
after you're gone. Well, with that in mind, gentlemen, thank you very much. We are going to see what the gentleman that you introduced us to, Julian, or that company that first listened to you about joining your podcast. We're arranging July 5th. They're going to join next week with us. So you have to be here since you're the one that brought us here. But it should be interesting to hear what they have to say about their the plans and their strategies and so forth. So we will have a guest host next week.
Yeah, they may be mad at me because I'd said I didn't want them on my podcast, but hey, we can go on this like lower tier.
Yeah, you can slum over here if you want. You can't go to the
Didn't pass our quality standards, but this one's
that's
fine.
Right. Didn't hit the threshold, but we don't have thresholds or standards on this show, so it's okay.
No. And that is how we differentiate ourselves as a brand.
And by the way, I need to point out, unfortunately, I won't be here the next 3 weeks, which is I hate to miss 3 in a row. But next week I will be traveling for the holiday weekend. The week following that, I am in meetings with a client that overlap. And the week after that, I'm having root canal. So,
that sounds fun.
Root canal.
Yeah. Actually, be on the show with us with the Novocaine still in effect.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I'm really not going to do that. I'm going to be... I suspect I'm not going to be in a good mood at all.
In a drug-induced stupor, we convince you to come on. Oh, come on, Tim. Come on, you can do it.
So one slight tangent, too, related to that. So last week, I don't know if you noticed or not, but at the beginning of the show, that morning, it actually had a crown. And the bottom right of my mouth, they couldn't numb it. They literally gave me 3 injections and I could still feel it. So they're like, I don't know what to do. We're either going to have to put you asleep. And they kept trying and it hurt like heck, right? So then finally they're like, well, we got one more thing. This is literally like a horse tranquilizer we can stick in there. It's like the super potent stuff they inject when they're extracting teeth, I guess. So they did that, and my whole side of my face, just because I'd already had 3 regular doses, they put in this other thing, and my whole face just, I felt like it was paralyzed. It was crazy. So I had that done at like 8 a.m. in the morning. It still hadn't worn off by the start of the show last week. So if you watched the beginning of the show, I was like drooling out of the side of this mouth because I literally had no feeling.
I just thought,
we didn't notice any difference. So wait,
but I didn't get feeling back in my face.
What's going on?
That's probably true, but I didn't get feeling in my face back until the end of the show. So I was trying to hide it, but I'm sure it was apparent to some people. Like, I was waiting for one of you to ask if I'd had a stroke or something because I felt like I had no movement on the side. So.
Robert, any testimonials, confessions you have today?
I actually had my first crown of my life, right? Earlier this week. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
So
We're all having dental work. This is
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Wow, I don't know. I'm fine.
so now and now, and the only reason
We'll miss you dearly over the next 3 weeks. If for any reason you feel like you want to come on Drunk Induced Stupor on the show after the root canal, we'd love to have you because
I would like to point out, I'm
Precedent's been
almost
set.
always here on a drug-induced stupor. So I don't know why 3 weeks from now would be any different.
True.
To that end, thank you all, and for those who watch us in the European Union and APAC, you'll get used to this soon, I'm sure,
Or not.
or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Could be either or. But until next week, thank you all very much, and we will see you 11:30 Eastern for show number 204 next week. Bye.
See you guys.